Your ski is underwater and the engine is full of water. Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. In our last video we were taking our backyard 650 and we're getting it all ready to restore and putting it together. We got the hull finished, ready to go. And now we need to work on the motor. So in today's video, we'll start on the motor and get that thing going. So what's this thing do? This thing's on the side of the motor. It's on the side of every 650 and 750 motor that Kawasaki made. Every Jetski, 750, 650, etc. What does it do? You pull it, nothing happens. So what does it do? Well, we gotta kind of imagine, use your imagination. You've sunk your ski. Your ski is underwater and the engine is full of water. So now the engine is not going to start because it's full of water. So you're going to pull this thing and you're going to look under here. See the water running out of the engine? So you can get some better footage here. There you go. See the stream running out? The water is running out of the engine. You're going to pull this pin and you're going to hold it until the water comes out. And then all the water runs out. Yeah, you can see the stream running out the bottom there. Do that for about 30 seconds, empty the motor, and now the engine will start right up. So your once sunk jet ski will now fire up and run. That's what that does. And it works great when it was new. However, over the years, this rubber stopper here, it slowly vacuums into the hole over the years, and then it form fits this hole. Then when you go to pull it, it expands and it doesn't seal there anymore, and it lets an air leak into your engine, and you'll lock up your motor. That's why it's best to remove these and throw them in the trash, unless you're prone to sinking your ski very often, which I doubt you are. As you can see, this head is in bad shape. We're going to take and find all the metal pieces, find all the steel pieces, and make sure they leave. We'll dig those out with hammer and chisel. That way they don't become dislodged. And normally you wouldn't do this on a motor. I want to demonstrate to you guys how resilient these 650 motors are. Probably the most reliable, the more bulletproof of the engines out there. Alright, doesn't look much better, but we're going to go ahead and run it. Like I said, as long as there's no material in there that'll dislodge and hurt our new motor, we'll be alright. So here we are, we got the motor apart. Cylinders look okay. Cylinders are in very good shape actually. The cases went to the parts washer. They turned out okay. They were very, very disgusting. We did have a piece of metal turn up here in the case, and we were able to pick that out of there. It didn't damage the cases, which I was kind of excited about. Usually it cracks the cases. So we're gonna put bolts in here where the case drain used to go. We're gonna put bolts in there. We don't use block off plates because they use O-rings and they do leak eventually. Crankshaft is in amazing condition. All these bearings are in good shape. This one is not so much. You can see down here the bearings. Yeah, there we go. See these bearings here? That's what this is supposed to look like. As you can see, all these are missing. So we're going to go ahead and take the back of this crank off here, take this plate off here. If you look and see this recess here, this crank is rebuildable, which is very positive. So we're going to go ahead and, when I dug through my hoard, we got a connecting rod kit. We're going to put a rod in this thing. And then we bought another piston, a 1/over piston, because the one that came out of it is just, it's in terrible shape. So we're going to go ahead and get rebuilding the crank. We'll throw the motor back together and we'll have this thing on the water. Okay, as you can see, we got the end of the crankshaft off of here. Pulled the bearing off, pulled the end cap off, and then we have the rod here. I was hoping it'd be a little easier to take off than that, but the end piece of the crank off of here, we just pressed it off, and then we got to our connecting rod here, which is kind of seized on here. All these parts and pieces fell out of the rod when I pulled it off of there. It's junk. Now we're going to put this in the press and press this pin out here. If we separate these two pieces here, we lose our 180-degree index, and it complicates the process by a factor of 10. So we're going to see if we can save that without doing it that way. We're all set up here. A lot of craziness going on here, but I don't know if you can see there's a little tiny chip of steel there that I've inserted up into the connecting rod pin. All the tie down is for so the crankshaft doesn't fall and hit the ground. We don't want to lose it. And then I've got this stuff spaced here so that as all the pressure is going this way, there's no movement and for stuff to go awry. So as you can see, we're already at about 4 ton, 8,000 pounds of pressure here. And as you can see, it's moving, so it's actually doing, it's hard to see what it's doing. We've got our new pin installed. This is our old pin here. You can kind of see where it's got some really bad stuff going on there. Those are the old rollers out of the bearing. That's the old connecting rod. That's in bad shape as well. It's worn out. And then we got the thrust bearing there, so we're going to put all new on. But for now, all our time is going to be spent trying to true this up here, getting this 180 degrees out, because that's going to be critical to what we're going to do next. So I want to show you guys my indexing setup here. I got these two chain wrenches here. They're both set up. And this helps me set the index, the 180 degrees. So I have the trigger in this hand, and I basically pull really hard on these, and it'll actually rotate. As it's pushing down, it'll rotate the direction I need to go into index. I got my feeler gauges set up so I don't go too far. We were able to reuse the web on the other crankshaft. We were able to reuse it, so we didn't have to do this to it. We just marked it. But this is my setup here. I got some crankcases here that are cut away, and you can see the basically if you watch the dial indicators, they run opposite. So that's how I check my index on my crank. We're doing this side here. That's not put together quite yet. It's a lot of work to do it. It's many hours, especially depending on how perfectionistic you are, which I tend to be really meticulous about this stuff. I don't have a fixture, so I have to do it the hard way. But this crankshaft was easier to do. You can see our brand new pin here, nice and shiny. Our old pin here and the old bearings and everything. I found us a new handle pull. It's in a lot better shape and it doesn't need to be painted, so we're going to use that. And then I also found, I dug this stuff out of my hoard. This came off of a magazine ski, and I was just going to paint this black like I did this front cover piece. I was able to paint it black. It turned out very nice. But I started looking at this a little closer, and underneath, was hiding this brand new, never seen the light of day vinyl. This came, like, as soon as they bought the ski brand new off the showroom floor, they covered it in this pink vinyl, and it comes right off. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this off, and we'll reuse this as well. And of course, somewhere else in my hoard, I found an old mat off of a 750. We're going to cut it down and use it for now. But this is just temporary. I talked to Jet Trim already. They're making us a brand new shiny kit for this. But I want to be able to ride it until the Jet Trim shows up. So we're just going to glue this down temporary for now, and we'll run it so we can ride it. I was able to weld a little tiny ball to the end of the screw here. Remember, this was recessed in here. I was able to weld something on there, and then I was able to get it with vice grips and pull this out. So now our steering plate's usable, so we're ready to put that together. And then you saw me doing the crankshafts. I didn't just do one crankshaft. It's a lot of work to put the crankshaft building equipment together. Here's a second crankshaft we did. And we'll put the end bearings on here later. But I wanted to show you guys this. This is our crankshaft that we finished up. That's going back in this boat. There's a way to do this. Here we go. are we hitting here? Okay. So see, that's not moving at all. That is absolutely perfect. And you can see that zeroed out. That doesn't happen very often. Usually the needle wiggles past one of the numbers, but that is perfectly true. And that's a lot of work to get to that point. It's hours. I didn't want to bore you with hours of footage. Truing the crankshaft's a lot of work. Putting together a crankshaft, it's going to turn out nice. And we're going to continue building the ski. So we're going to go ahead and put the motor together. After I put this bearing on, we have these awesome Japanese bearings from old school 90s Japanese bearings that we're going to take, and we'll put this on the barbecue grill and get it up to about 140 degrees, and it'll slide right on the end there. Okay, as you can see, the motor's all glued together and done nicely. We've got these drain holes to deal with from the assembly that we removed where we pull the cable. The best way I found to do these guys is to cut a piece of 1/4-inch aluminum dowel, install them in here, and weld them from inside and outside. That's not realistic for most people, so the worst thing you can do is use a block-off plate. The reason we used to use a block-off plate back in the day was because the sanctioning body for the jet ski racing, they said you can't modify your cases. Fixing that leak created a fix in the cases, like a modification, welding it. So they made a block-off plate that you could bolt on. That way it was still race legal. We don't care about being race legal, we care about being reliable. So the best way I found to do this is to put a bolt here. It's just a little 8mm bolt, not even 1/2 inch long, and we'll put some sealant on it, like 1211 or Moto Seal, Honda Bond, Yamaha Bond, whatever you want to call it. And we'll just run these straight in there. We don't tap them, we don't do anything, because the hole's just almost big enough. We just run them in there till they seat, and those will never leak, I guarantee it. Just put a sealant on there, shove it in there, and run it in until it stops. Don't get crazy, you'll break it off. And don't use them too long, because this hole does taper as it gets deeper. So we're going to do that real quick, and then we're going to be ready to finish putting this motor together. So I've put some sealant on there, both of them, got them started. We're just going to run them. You hear it bottom out there? It's done. It squeezes the sealant out. And that's it. It's bottomed out. It'll never leak. That is permanent. Here's another tidbit of useful information here. The motor mount has these larger notches on one side than the other side. See how small these are? These big notches go to the back of the motor. That way when you set the motor down, you have to slide the motor back onto the drive shaft. That's about 1 inch there. This gives you that inch to slide the motor back onto the motor mounts. That's how that goes on, in case you ever wondered. The motor's together. Got a new base gasket there. I wanted to show you guys, this is our old piston. It's still 1mm over. This is our new piston. Notice I didn't hone the cylinders. I didn't do anything. I didn't touch up, modify. I took our head, I dug out all the FOD, got rid of all that stuff. Anything I used a magnet, anything that was magnetic, I dug out of the head. I didn't polish, I didn't reshape, I didn't do anything. We're going to run this ski just like this. So from this point forward, until we take the motor apart to start porting and modifying it, this motor is going to be running in our 650 until we decide otherwise. But I just want to demonstrate how resilient these motors. These are the most bulletproof motors in the industry. No other two-stroke engine has been made to outdo the 650 Cowie motor. I want to show you guys how resilient it is. That's why we're going to run it as loose as we can. I saw something give us a red flag, cause for pause here. Notice how far this sticks up? That's extremely normal. And the way you can tell is if you set a nut down next to it, right, the castle nut's going to cover that up. If you set this down next to this thing, notice how it's protruding farther up? This is not seated all the way. There's only 2 reasons that happens. One is it was over torqued and they've slowly been pulling the stud out as they tighten it, which means we got to pull it back apart and do a time cert. Or they took this out and put it back in and just hand threaded it in. So we're going to try to tighten it and see if it tightens. If not, we're going to take it back apart. Okay, now we're to the reed cages. You can see these reeds here are metal. These are steel reeds. When they break, they go through the motor and cause damage. So we're going to change them out to a fiberglass reed pedal. This is stock from the 90 model year and newer. So we're going to use those. And also what I like to do is this reed cage This reed cage guide right here, I like to bend these up just a couple millimeters. It's not much, but it really does make a difference on top end. So when we unscrew these out of here, we put this in the vise right along this line where the screws go, and we just take a pair we take an adjustable wrench and we bring them all the way down to the thickness of this, and all we do is tweak these just a little bit, like maybe, like I said, just a couple millimeter, not even an eighth of an inch. And it makes a really big difference on how far these reed pedals open. We want those to open up more than that. And the fiberglass pedals, they're more forgiving for how far they'll open, so we're going to give that a little bit more clearance. And then also on the 650 motors only, they had a drain hole down here for the oil injection. No other ski after this, they did this. They realized that the oil injection does a nice job of aerating the oil and carrying it through the intake manifold in the reed cages. So they didn't put these holes on anymore after this, because they found out that this really affects your crankcase pressure, and the crankcase pressure is important on these two strokes. So we will fill this in with JB Weld or silicone or 1211 or something to plug this hole, and that'll be our reed cage assembly. And that takes us to the intake manifold and the carburetor. We'll do that next. But for now, we're going to deal with the stators. I've got both types of stators here. Every 650 will have either one of these two stators. And what you'll see here is these plastic pieces here. These are insulators. This here's your charging coil for your ignition, for your charging system on the ski. And those wires will always be the same color. On the newer stators, they're brown. On the older stators, they're yellow. Okay, those are that's your charging system. These are the wires that go to the rectifier, and you can interchange these with the older and newer style rectifiers. You can plug the brown wires into a yellow wire rectifier. It just steps the voltage down and charges the battery. And on this one here, the black is going to be your ground. This one has a black with a yellow lead. And then this purple wire is a trigger wire. This wire comes off of this pickup here, and you'll notice it's not insulated. The other half of this pickup coil goes to ground. So the ground side of the battery. So this sends a signal, AC signal, to your ignition system. This is the signal that the ignition system steps up for your ignition coil to give you the voltage to drive your spark plugs. And on the older stators, you have two grounds. One's black and the other one is black with yellow, just like the other stator. However, your trigger wire is black with a red lead, with a black stripe. This confused a lot of people, which is eventually why they changed and went to the purple wire, because people are under the impression that black is always ground. This is your trigger wire for your ignition system. So if you ever see a black with a red lead, that's your trigger for your ignition that goes to the CDI or your aftermarket ignition system, or you can go straight to your coil and run a total loss system, however you want to do it. That's your pickup for your pickup coil here. So those are our stators. We're going to use this stator here. We're going to use the old style stator, and we'll set that up, and when we install that, we're going to run the line here where you set your timing mark. We're going to set this a couple millimeters advanced, because that's actually good for the ski with these modern day fuels. As much as I badmouth our modern day gasoline, that's the one nice thing about it. It's way more stable, and we can advance the timing a couple degrees all the way through the spectrum, and it'll run really well. Here's our mark. Here's our mark. You see how the two marks are not lined up? We are slightly counterclockwise. That is advanced. We've advanced the timing 2 degrees, and that's very safe. It'll maintain reliability. Stator's installed. Bolts are tight. Starter Bendix looks a little rough, but it actually works really well. The one-way sprag works like it's supposed to. We've greased both sides of it. I'm going to show you guys here the spring. That is a spring down inside of there. See how it's not rusted? It's in good shape. If that spring needs replacing, you have to buy them from Yamaha. Yamaha uses the same starter Bendix all through most of the 90s. So any 1990 or newer Yamaha will have the same Bendix. And if you look at the parts fish, you'll see that you can actually buy individual parts for this starter Bendix here. It's rebuildable. Kawasaki doesn't do that for whatever reason, I don't know. So if you need some of those parts, you get them from Yamaha. So now the Bendix is ready to go. We'll put the flywheel on, we'll put the Woodruff key, we'll torque it, we'll put the front cover on. This is what the reeds look like, the reed cage stoppers. You can see these, I've already bent all these down. I've got them all stacked together. And this is my template. That's all it takes, guys, that little bit there. Now these are all matched. When we put them all together, it'll look factory, but the reeds will actually open a little bit farther and it will yield in more power. Intakes all together. Intake manifolds on, reeds are done, front cover's on. Exhaust manifold is kind of a junker. This Boss here tells me that it's an 86X2 exhaust manifold. They only use these 1 year. That'll be on our list of things to upgrade down the road, but for now it'll work. Like I said, we just want to see this thing run. And then the carburetor. We're using the original carburetor, which is 34 millimeter. I don't know why Kean calls it a 28. It's actually a 34. Took the 48 Pilot out that comes stock with them and put a 55 in there because of the oil injection removal. We're putting thicker fuel in there now, so we need a bigger Pilot jet. Remove this screw right here. This whole plate comes off. Underneath this brass boss right here, there'll be a void. That's where the fuel comes in from the top of the carb. And you want to make sure there's no debris in there. Tighten it all back up. Make sure this pops off nicely. Sometimes that'll stick with these modern day fuels. Then we're going to put the diaphragm back together. We're going to button all this up and we'll be ready to go. And then the next thing we deal with is the start and stop wires. The battery cables, these do not bend at all. They're very rigid, very stiff. When battery cables get like this, that's due to corrosion. So those are no good. We're going to throw those away anyway. We'll make some new ones up, get those mounted. We mount those to the starter. The red one goes to the starter and back to the relay box, and the battery ground goes to one of these two starter bolts right here. We'll have that all done and we'll be ready to go. Okay guys, I guess we've reached the stopping point. We got the motor installed and everything. We got a few other things to button up before we can fire it, but we'll work on the handle pull and buttoning up the exhaust and the electrics, and we'll work on the ignition system next. So stay tuned.